In this video, we're going to show you how to create a constant height letter. What I mean by that is that the point of this letter all comes to the same height. If we tilt this up, we can see that from the side. Now, the only way to achieve this is by varying the angle as it travels around here. If we have a constant angle, which is what we get if we use the standard create shape function or prismatic toolpath, then the height of the points in the letter would vary, and that wouldn't give us this effect. To create this shape, we're going to use the 2-rail sweep function within the software. I'm going to show you how to construct the spine of your letter or the center line of your geometry using the vector drawing tools. Then we'll examine how it's possible to very accurately position the cross sections for your 2-rail sweep to give us all the angles of the letter. And then finally we'll throw some quick toolpaths on this just to finish the part off. So let's begin by starting a new copy of Aspire. So let's click on the icon to create a new file. I'm going to set up a job which is 10 inches by 10 inches and thickness of 1 inch with the Z0 set to the top, not really something that we're going to worry about too much in this part. XY datum set in the bottom left corner, modelling resolution set to very high, and hit OK. Next, we're going to come over and click on the draw text icon, and we're going to use the Mongolian Bati text here. You could find a font of your own if you don't have that exact one there. Something maybe with a serif on it would be good, maybe even Times New Roman or something like that. And I'm going to set up this so that we just make a single letter A, and we're going to ensure that we set this to be bold, centered, and a text height of 8 inches. Hit apply and close, and I'm going to hit F9 on the keyboard in order to center that. So what we want to do now is create a set of vectors which basically represent the center line or the spine of our letter. So we're going to use a few tricks in constructing these. Let's come over and click on the icon to draw a polyline. I'm going to start by snapping to this point here and snapping to this point here, basically to pick up the angle of the this part of the letter. Next, I want to rotate this 90 degrees, so I'm going to click Rotate Selected Objects. I'm going to click its center point here, and I'm going to enter an angle of 90, hit Apply and close. And I know now that that is perpendicular to this line here, so if we just move that across there. Now I want to trim this vector back. If I come over at the moment and say trim, then it just disappears, and the reason for that is that it can't trim to something which is still a piece of text. So I'm going to hit Ctrl Z on the keyboard to undo that. I'm going to select our text and I'm going to click on the icon here to convert the object to curves. Now it's just converted that to regular vectors, and we can use the trim function or the scissors there in order to trim those two ends. The reason I want to do that is so I can now pick up the midpoint of this part of the letter. So it picked up the angle, we picked up the midpoint there. So again, if we were to go ahead and draw a polyline in here, so I'll just redraw our original line there, select that, and then I'm going to click and drag that across and snap it to the midpoint of that line there. Now at this stage we should be able to go ahead and delete that line. We'll come back to this in a moment when we have some other geometry to extend it towards. I'm going to do the same operation on this side. So again, I'm going to select the vector, and this time I'm going to copy that vector. So it's right mouse click and go to copy. I'm going to hit 9 on the keyboard, which rotates something 45 degrees. So I'm going to hit that twice in order to get my perpendicular line. Again, I can trim this off. I can right mouse click and paste my vector in there, pick up its midpoint and snap it to the midpoint there, and again we can delete that one. Next we're going to take these and we can do our first extension up to the top. So click on Extend Vectors, I'm going to click on this line here, click on this line here, and that's just extended them to their common intersection point, as we can see there. Next, let's click on the polyline tool again, and I'm just going to snap to the midpoint of the serif down here on the left, and then just zooming out, I'm going to stretch that across and just come way past the other side of the letter and make sure that snaps horizontally. going to right mouse click just to accept that. Next I want a couple more polylines actually in this case, so I'm going to come back to the polyline tool. I'm going to snap into the corner and come up 45 degrees, just extending past that line there, hit space, snap in the corner there, 45 degrees, click and hit space, and then we'll just jog over using the arrow. Again, snap there, 45 degrees and hit the space bar, snap there, snap to 45 degrees and right mouse click in order to exit that. Now we'll come back to the trimming tool, the scissors, and I'm just going to trim the horizontal line we've got there. So just scroll over to this side, just trim that out, and so now I've been left with two pieces of horizontal line which I know are in line with the midpoint of the serif here, and have now got this sort of 45 degree angle to the corners. So we'll just delete those pieces of vector that I don't want. Next I want to extend these lines down to those, so I'm going to click on the extend vectors, click on this vector here and click on this vector here, and then do the same procedure on the right and hit close. The next vector I want is going to go horizontally across the A here and needs to be halfway up and down this part here. So if we just sketch a line between the midpoint of here and the midpoint of here, and then sketch a line which is snapped horizontally, I'm going to select that, shift and select the line there, go into the line selected objects and click on the center icon. So we've just moved that up so that it's in the middle. We can delete that part there. Then I'm going to trim this bit out and this bit out, close that, and then select those two bits and delete them. Now let's come up to the top of our letter here, and we'll just sketch a line down from the midpoint here to the point below there. And then I'm just going to sketch a horizontal line in again, so just snapping horizontally, then just pick up the midpoint of that and pick up the midpoint of this. And again now what we can do is just trim out, so I'm going to just trim out the two sides there, delete these three lines, and then just select these two vectors and close those with a straight line. So now we've got the main set of vectors here, so there's one there and then these three horizontal ones, and if we select all of those, so the four vectors there, I'm going to come over and click on the icon to offset the selected vectors. We want to go in both directions, so both outwards and inwards by a very small amount. We're just going to use 5/1000ths of an inch. I want to create sharp corners, and I also want to delete the originals. So if we hit offset based on that and close, and we zoom in, you can see what's happened. We've just offset 5/1000ths up, 5/1000ths below, so the distance between these would actually be 0.01 of an inch now. And we've got two sets of vectors for each single vector that we had before. Now if we zoom in like this, what we want to do is trim these out using the scissors tool. So just zooming out and in with the mouse wheel, or we can hit F on the keyboard to fit that in and zoom in using the mouse wheel again. Hit F and then just position your cursor and then roll the mouse wheel forward to zoom in. Hit F, close that. Now to finish this off, what I want to do is join these lines, so the ends here are open. I'm going to come over with those selected and say join with a straight line, and you can see that's just joined that up there. So we're going to work our way round, join with a straight line, join with a straight line there, and then for the other end here is just to close the vector off. So, rather the other end here. If we see that's still open, we can click and join that, or close it as it would be in this case. So now we've got this outside vector, and we've got an inner vector here as well. The one last thing I do want to do here is we're going to use these as two rail sweeps, so I need to add a little bit of a flat on the top here in order to make sure I'm going to be able to work with this correctly. So I'm just going to arbitrarily pick the position here. We'll just click. It needs to be a very small amount, and I can just cut that off there, and so now we've got a little bit of a flat on the top of there, which we'll be able to use in order to attach our cross section to when we come and do the the two rail sweep function. So the last vector we need to construct before we can actually model our shape is going to be the cross section. Now to start with here, we'll just do a simple angled cross section. So I'm going to come over, click on the rectangle, I'm going to sketch the rectangle here, and we'll just make this 1/2 inch wide by 1/8 inch high, hit apply and close, and then I'm just going to zoom in on this, select it, hit N to go into node editing, hover over the bottom span and hit D on the keyboard to delete it, and then hover over this node and hit D there as well. So now I know that I've got a cross section which is 1/2 inch wide and 1/8 inch high, which is giving me this angle here. So we could proceed now and create our swept shape, but one thing I do need to be aware of is I've got a curve on the outside and an angle on the inside here, so if I sweep through those shapes I am going to end up with a bit of a crease at the top, and I need to subjectively decide if I want that to be the case or if I want to introduce a curve into my letter there and allow that to transition a bit more smoothly. And I think in this case I would like to introduce a curve. So I'm going to select this vector, hit N on the keyboard to go into node editing. I'm going to hit I to add in a couple of points, just really arbitrarily, and then hover over this span and hit D on the keyboard, and this span and hit D on the keyboard to delete it. Now selecting this, I'm going to click on the icon to join those with a smooth curve. Now we can come onto this one, again go into node editing, and here we just need to choose and hit I on the keyboard again and decide where we want these to go, D on the keyboard to delete the spans, and then click on the icon to close with a smooth curve. Say totally subjective as to what I want this transition to look like. I'm going to come do the same on this side, so I would like to get it roughly looking the same. So I'm just going to compare there, hit I on the keyboard here and here, D on the keyboard here and here, and then close with a curve. And then finally on this side, I and I, D and D to delete that, and then select that and close with a curve. So that looks good. I know I'm going to end up with a small flat on the top of the letter here, but that's the choice I've made with creating that kind of transition. Next we can come down to the modelling tab, and I'm going to select my outer rail and shift and select my inner rail and click on the icon here to go into the two rail sweep, and then click the button that says use selection. Now the most important thing here is that I have the start points for the inner and outer rail adjacent to each other. So if I zoom in here, I can see this one is here and this one is down here, and I would like them to be adjacent, as I say. So I'm going to come over this rail and I'm going to say make start point there. Now the other thing I need to look for is the direction. At the moment this is going to the right with these small arrows and this is going to the left, so I want to reverse this as well. So if we say reverse rail, now we can see I've got my start points adjacent there, and now we've got everything flowing in the right directions as well. Now if I hit F to fit on the keyboard, what I'm going to do is take my cross section and I'm going to start adding it into all the places where I want to create a point of transition. So I'm going to click on here and that's going to put that in place there. Then I'm going to come to the next corner, I'm going to click on here, that will add it where it thinks it needs to go, and I need to just click on that node and drag it to snap it to the next point there. Going to hit F to fit and just keep zooming out and in to do this. So I'm going to come around here and just add that in there. I'm going to add that one in there. I'm going to click, make sure I'm snapping onto the corner. May need to zoom right in order to snap that onto that inner corner there. F to fit again to come out. Snap it onto there. F to fit. So just working my way round the part and then just moving the inner node so that it's in the adjacent position or the opposite position to the outer node. So again, might want to add a couple of vectors to help me control the curve there. We'll have to see how they look. Need to make sure you don't accidentally do that where you drag it onto the rail across from the other. Sometimes need to zoom in to double check that. These lines should help you to see a nice clean shape being developed. Come up to the top, and click on this corner, drag this up there, click on this corner, drag that up there, F to fit, again down to the curve, just clicking into the corner, just double check we've got that on the right vector, which I have. Again, snapping to the corner, using the cursor and seeing the snap positions being indicated. Then every time you see me zoom out there, I'm just hitting the F key on the keyboard to zoom everything back into the full view. So F, and then the last one if we want to add a bit more control again around the curve. Really up to me as to what I want to do there. So that should now close up nicely. I'm going to set this, just leave that set to add, and we'll call this A outer, and I'm going to hit apply, and so we can see what's happening there. Let's just tile the window, so I'm going to hit page up, and you can see what's happening is it's created this nice shape. Sweep between spans is correct, but I don't want to scale the cross section with the width. I want it to be consistent size, so I'm going to uncheck that and make sure fill center of inner closed vector rails. So now when we hit apply, it's going to fill in the gaps, which is exactly what I want it to do, and I know that I've got a consistent cross section going all around my part. If we would like, we could scale that to a different height, so maybe we want to scale it up to 1/4 of an inch rather than just 1/8 of an inch there, and you can see the effect that that is having on my finished shape. Once I like the way that looks, then we can hit Start New Component. Now what I want to do is select the inner rail here because I want this cross section to slope up from left to right, and then we're going to select this rail here. So we can click on Use Selection. Again, I want to make sure I've got these points adjacent to each other. So this inner one is flowing left, as we can see it here, or in a counterclockwise direction if you want to think of it like that. And so if we come up to this one, I can see that is flowing in the same direction, but I do want to right mouse click here and say Make Start Point. Let's just hit F to fit there. Now what we should be able to do is just let the software find all the nodes, because this has the same number of nodes on it. So if I can, I come over the point there, right mouse click, and use the option here. Sorry, I've just need to make sure we select the cross section there. Going to click in order to assign it, so that's what I was missing. Now I can right mouse click on here and I've got the option to add to all rail nodes. So very important, I select it and assign it to that position, and because the inner and outer vector here have got the same number of nodes, the software will automatically pick those up for me and assign that cross section to each of those positions. I couldn't have done that with the outer vector because I didn't have the right number of nodes. Now with this component, I'm going to call it A inner, and what I want to do is actually set this to merge low, because we want it to create this shape but then just to keep the lowest part in the middle. So if we click on the merge low option there and hit apply, you can see that that's actually going to generate exactly what I'm looking for there. So again, it's flowing up from this side up to here, so that's why we selected inner vector and outer vector in this case, and I've used merge low because what the software does there is it creates my new shape for me. It's filling the center of the closed rails, which is what I want it to do, and then it's keeping all the lowest shapes within that area. So a lot of interesting things going on there. You may want to just go through that a couple of times to really understand what's happening. If I hit close now, I've got two components. We've got our outer and inner component there, and what I'd really like to do at this stage is just bake those together and maybe get rid of this center portion here. So let's just zoom to fit and look down the z-axis here in the 3D view. Now let's select our two components, click on the icon to bake the selected components into a single one, which we'll just rename as A finished, and now we can select that, shift and select that inner vector there, and use the option to clear area of selected component outside. So that's given us this constant cross-section letter. Now we've made a prismatic letter in this case, but you could use any cross-section you want here. We just used a simple sloping line, but you could make that any shape you want in order to do a similar operation. Now you might think with something like this we could achieve the same effect by using an angled tool and just running it around the vector. But unfortunately we'd get neither the sharp corners on the inside or this constant height, because to maintain a constant height on a letter like this, the angle has to vary as it travels around the shape. If we let the angle remain constant, then the height of the letter would vary as it got wider and thinner. So that's why this is not achievable just by using something like the prismatic toolpath. Let's show you how we would go about cutting something like this now. So what I want to do is add a little bit of a base height onto this, because I would like to let the tool just roll slightly over the edge of the part, and then we'll come in with another tool to cut it out. So I'm going to select the component, hold down the properties or click the properties there, and we'll add a base height of 0.1 of an inch just to raise that up, and hit close there. Now we're going to switch to toolpaths tab, and I'm going to select the inner vector and the outer vector here, and these are the ones we're going to use as the boundaries for our toolpaths. So before we do our material setup, if you plan to actually machine this example, then it's very important that you recalculate all the toolpaths using parameters and settings that you know are safe and appropriate for your machine, whatever tooling you plan to use and the material that you're going to cut it into. With that said, let's click on the set button for material setup, and I'm going to set this up to cut out of 3/4 inch material, XY datum in the lower left, and let's just put a gap above of 0.05 of an inch there. Everything else looks reasonable, so we can hit the OK button. Now in this case I won't worry about roughing this out. If you were cutting hard material you may need to, but you might be just running this in something like high density foam, in which case we could go straight to a finishing toolpath. I'm going to select a 1/4 inch ball nose tool for our machining for this, and those rates and speeds look okay, so I'm going to hit OK there. I'm going to go with a selected vector, so remember we've got this outer and inner vector selected, but I do want the tool to just roll over the edge of this a little bit, so I'm going to set the boundary offset for this to be 0.15 of an inch, so it's just going to go past the edge a bit for me. In fact, that's probably a little bit too big there. Let's just have it go 0.1, and then I'm going to set this to cut in an offset strategy, so sort of following the shape of the letter. So I'll go for 3D finish. Let's hit calculate, just taking the default step over for this. There's my toolpath, so we can preview that to see what it's going to look like. That looks okay. We might want to increase the step over a little bit there if we wanted to reduce some of the lines that we've got. Maybe if we double click that and go into edit, we might change that down to maybe 7%, hit OK and recalculate. That's going to take a little bit longer to cut, but we should see a smoother finish when we preview it. So if we reset the preview and preview that, now we've just increased the step over by that much that it should create an even smoother finish for us. If we like the way that looks, the last thing left to do is just to cut this out. So we can click on the profile toolpath. We have the vector selected. For the cut depth here, I'm just going to hit Z equals. I'm going to change this to 1/4 inch end mill and cut outside the vector. We can add various options for tabs or separate last pass. In this case we'll just take the defaults pretty much, hit calculate and preview what that's going to look like, And now we could double click in order to delete the waste material and take a look at our actual machined letter. So this letter is going to be constant height, as we can see there if we tilt that up. So not possible to do with the prismatic toolpath and a constant angle bit. But there you have seen that there is a method for doing this if you really needed to create a letter of this type of shape. So that almost concludes this video. Let's take a second to save the file now. Go to File, Save As, and in the project folder, let's just call that Constant Height A and hit Save. There's a few different conclusions that we may come to having watched this example. One is that this is quite a complex process, and so we'd prefer to work within the confines of what the Prism toolpath will give us. However, if you do decide to do it, at least you've seen how the technique works, how we can use the vector construction and the power of the two-rail sweep to really give us a great deal of control over the shape that we want to make. And that concludes this video.